If you're in education, or even if you're not, you know that the education landscape is filled with mistakes that block student thinking. I call those thinking blockers. What if these mistakes are coming from us? There's a powerful path for reclaiming student thinking. Let's walk through the subtle ways 6 of our well intentioned habits block student thinking and what we can do instead. Thinking blocker number 1, rushing through the lesson. We're all trying to follow our pacing guides. But during this rush, we're missing the most important part, student think time. Teachers pose the question, and seconds later are given the answer. Students get conditioned to wait us out. During this rush to stay on schedule, students are often rushing through problems too quickly and spending little time on reflection. If teachers do the thinking, why should students persist? The incentive to struggle vanishes. When we slow down, even for an extra 10 seconds, students have time to try out new ideas, hear other people's opinions, and adjust their own thinking. Now let's discuss how the language we use can either invite thinking or discourage it. Thinking blocker number 2, asking questions that chase answers instead of reasoning. Does this sound familiar? Who has the answer to question number 4? When we do that, we value correctness over the process. This shift in language has a massive impact. It sets up memorization as the goal. When the focus is on the right answer instead of the process, reasoning takes a back seat. But when we can focus on reasoning and give it the driver's seat, students' confidence can grow and they will try more things. The risk taking will go through the roof. When we shift to questions like, what did you try first? What do you notice? Then we focus on reasoning instead of just the answer. We show students that we value the process as well as the answer. I've put together a free guide linked in the description below, and what it discusses are 3 strategies that you can implement immediately and see the results. Now let's explore how the physical setup of your classroom can impact student thinking, which brings us to thinking blocker number 3, how physical setup can stifle collaboration. Are your desks in rows? Rows communicate subtly. Work alone. Don't talk. Stay in your lane. Isolation impacts students' ability to discuss and learn from their peers. Group work only thrives in an environment that's designed for interaction. When students see each other's work, hear different strategies, and revise their own strategies, they learn to process information differently. In effect, the room starts doing half the teaching for us. In my classroom, I've found that groups of no more than 2, maximum 3 in a group are the most effective. Any more than that, and we have too many dynamics and too many different personalities in a group, and we don't end up with equal or engaged participation in the group. One thing I have discovered is that plants and lower shelves make super dividers between groups. Even if they don't physically divide, just the fact that they're there seems to discourage talking between groups. Now let's dive into the materials that either engage or disengage authentic student work, which brings us to thinking blocker number 4, materials that only require recall. Are your practice questions fostering understanding or just routine? Even the best intentioned worksheets can become busy work. Worksheets that provide modeled solutions often discourage students from taking risks. I've been guilty of that one myself. I was trying to provide a work solution so they would have an idea of one way to approach it. Students looked at it, and that's the only way that they approached it. So they didn't look at it and try to work with the material. They just followed a memorized procedure. Repetitive questions often lead to mindless regurgitation instead of creative problem solving. So you want to be careful about if you provide a bunch of similar typed questions, perhaps you only ask students to choose 3. Or perhaps you say, we're going to do 5 of these 8. Or it could be use this strategy to solve that problem. There's a bunch of different ways to approach that. When tasks require students to decide rather than do, the thinking level goes through the roof instantly. In my TPT store, Thinking Math Corner, I focus on rich thinking tasks and applying levels of questions so that students aren't only mindlessly repeating a procedure. Thinking has to be involved. Please feel free to visit my store. It's linked in the description. Next, we'll highlight how grading practices can support or undermine student growth, which brings us to thinking blocker number 5, grading that punishes exploration. Are you punishing mistakes instead of valuing the thinking? When you grade, are you focused on the mistakes or valuing the thinking? Yeah, it's a good question to ask oneself. The more we reward correctness, the more that students are going to play it safe. When we penalize incorrect strategies, we develop a fear of failure instead of resilience. In the effort to grow a growth mindset in our students, we need to focus on strategies, on what we're doing correctly, as opposed to only the answer. Showing your work is one great way to do that. But it also means that if a student has a mistake that isn't conceptually relevant, perhaps they don't get penalized for that. When my students are completing a question, if they make a tiny mistake that's not part of the conceptual understanding that I'm assessing for that concept, then I note it, obviously. But when it comes down, if they've followed the correct procedure and they're interpreting correctly and they're doing all of that, they could get full credit for that question. So if I'm doing a slope word problem and they're evaluating things properly, but they write out 3 minus 5, but they get -1 instead of -2, then I'm going to note it. But if everything else is done correctly, then did they really conceptually not understand slope? Did they conceptually not understand how to apply it? No, they understood perfectly. They made a calculation error. So what I do is I mark it, and then at the bottom, I check saying it's correct, but I put a G saying correct given that error. So they know that that isn't the exact right answer, but given the fact that they made that little error, that's what they got. Understanding that mistakes are how we learn, and that builds student attitudes. Their risk-taking, their problem-solving strategies, their willingness to engage are all built on that. But grading can be a big part of decreasing that willingness. When students are willing to take risks, their reasoning improves fast. What's one final habit that we need to change to foster student thinking in the classroom? That's thinking blocker number 6, and it's over-helping. Are you giving too much help too quickly? The minute a student struggles, and we don't like to see them struggle, but struggling is the point. That's how we learn. Are you jumping in right away? Or are you letting them struggle with it a little bit? Not to the point of complete frustration and zoning out, but are we giving them time to work with the problem, reason it out, check with another student, all of those wonderful strategies? If we jump in right away, we're saying, you don't know how to figure it out. We're communicating that. And I don't think we realize that we are. Stepping back allows them to test new ideas, adjust their thinking, and do that all by themselves. It also sends the message that we trust them to be able to figure it out. I have confidence that you can do this. I know you can. Your pause, your silence might be the most powerful teaching move you could do all day. Now that you know some of the mistakes that might be impeding student thinking in the classroom, you're probably wondering, well, how do I get them to be curious? How do I spark that curiosity in the classroom without throwing out my entire lesson plan? Click the video on the screen and I'll show you how to do it right now.